it's a very superficial forum for discussion. It's like, to a certain extent, it's like the catwalk in a fashion parade. You just come out, talk for 3 minutes, and go in again. No discussion. At most, if you say something which is not liked, you are simply ignored. So there is no discussion. There's no discussion at all. So, for example, when we were discussing sanctions, no one, even from the Commission, would say, but is the world only the EU, G7, the United States? Now, what happens if we squeeze Russia? We're going to kill Russia because we're not going to trade with Russia. We're going to sanction Russia on our terms. But doesn't the 86% of the rest of the world exist? Is there a possibility that what we take away from Russia, Russia will look for in China, in India, in Indonesia, in other places? Not even a discussion like that.
So just let me ask this, Eric. So on the EU level, when you meet all the other foreign ministers, and you're supposed to have a discussion, right? Because on paper, the EU is an international organization, right? I mean, the sovereign power still rests within the member states. At least that's how it's supposed to be. But even then, there's no real back and forth. There's no kind of process of trying to find a common position. So
Oh,
where does the
no.
position then come from? And where did this idea that EU equals the world, Europe plus America equals the world, where does that come from? I mean, people cannot be that blind that they just take that for granted.
You'll be surprised. I think they are culturally blind. I think there is this, I think 500 years of colonialism has definitely spoiled the Europeans who had empires because the attitude is taken for granted so much that they are not even aware of it. And for example, I remember telling telling the even Borrell, who I consider as a friend and who I consider who was trying to be decent in very difficult circumstances because I know what he really believes in. What he really believes in and what he sometimes had to say were very different. I remember how he was literally sort of boycotted and sort of punished when he had decided to travel to Moscow to meet Minister Lavrov. People were, especially the Baltic countries and some of the Eastern European countries like Poland, were really angry at him for even just meeting Lavrov because they said we shouldn't meet people. So then what happens? So when I for example I was saying why don't you go down you know to Tunisia, to Libya, to meet those people because we're not meeting them, and they used to tell me, but what do we go and tell them? And I said, listen, for the first time, can you please not tell them anything and just listen? Because we concoct these programs of Global Gateway or the Southern Neighborhood Program or the Memorandum of Understanding with different Mediterranean countries, and there is no decency of sitting down with them to put a common program. It's just what the EU needs out of those countries. And then they are surprised. Then they are surprised when you tell them, do you know that the Chinese work in a different way? Yes, yes. What do the Chinese do? And I said, well, as far as I know, the Chinese sit down with the ministers when they meet them in Africa, for example, and tell them, what can we do for you? What are the infrastructure projects that you feel we should invest here in this country? So it's the other way around. Can you imagine on the global gateway, where the European Union prides itself of having, you know, thought of an answer for the
Belt and
Belt and
Road.
Road Initiative, because basically that's what it is. On the implementation committee of the initiatives to be taken in Africa, there is no African sitting. It is just a one-sided affair. It's just what I want out of you. And when you tell them, but this is very short-sighted. I mean, how do you expect migration not to happen from Africa when we are depriving young Africans of the opportunities to create wealth and to have a more diversified economy in Africa itself? Because all we need out of Africa are the raw materials and energy products. And we do not let them produce the things that we need so that they create jobs. So how are they going to create jobs? And then it's no wonder that they turn towards Turkey, they turn towards Russia, they turn towards China for investment because those are more equitable in how they deal with that. It's not that they are angels and the Europeans are devils. I'm not talking about that. It's just a completely different attitude of how to deal with other non-European countries.
Is it fair to say that Europe at this point in the 2020s just has utterly, completely unlearned how to do diplomacy as the art of reciprocal negotiations with equals? I mean,
No,
it seems.
Pascal, completely, completely. You're not even meant not to sleep with the enemy, not to talk to the enemy,
You have a friend.
not to talk. For example, I can tell you, when we used to have, conflicts in Eastern Mediterranean, you'd have Greece, you'd have Turkey, Cyprus, Egypt. Usually in the summer, the tension used to go up. And then I would realize, so it's time for France to sell fighters to Greece, or it's time to sell, you know, something which has to do with armaments to Greece. So now it's important that we create tension. So all of a sudden, the tension goes up. Once the contract is signed, there is calm again in the Eastern Mediterranean. I'm saying this factually. I'm not just being cynical, Uh, Especially, I was told that check where the French foreign ministry, where the French foreign minister, who I consider a friend, Jean-Yves Le Drian, uh, check where his constituency is. It's where the military industrial complex of France is. He is considered a very capable arms dealer. He is the one who, when he sits down with other foreign ministers, he is not going to discuss diplomatic issues. He says, you know, what are we going to sell you? Basically, there is this. It's like what happens at the Munich Security Conference. When I attended, I was struck that the first row is the defense ministers. This is the protocol. First row is the defense ministers. Second row is the foreign affairs ministers. Now I'm not saying that I wanted the first row, but I think it's very symbolic. I think it's very clear that now it's the armaments which are important, not diplomacy. So yes, imagine saying, I've been invited to, for example, the Antalya diplomacy in Turkey, and the Cypriot foreign minister, my colleague, is very offended that I'm going to go. Just to go. Not I told him, not I say, listen, I'm going to go there and say that Turkey should go over, take over Cyprus. Now, in that case, I would understand. But imagine, I told him, I'm going to go to